Hey, everybody, welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano, and I am so excited about the episode we're talking about today. We are talking about event planning. Chances are at some point in your life, you will be called upon to plan something like a corporate party, or maybe a reunion, a class reunion, a milestone celebration of some kind, someone's birthday or anniversary. Maybe it's your own wedding. And when you sit down to actually begin that process, it can feel pretty overwhelming, like you've got guests coming and you want to get it right. The other side of the coin, which I think many of us have been on, is that you go to an event like that and something about that event is just off. Whether it's the venue, whether there's something wrong with the food, or whether there's something that happens with the weather that should have been anticipated and wasn't planned for. And unfortunately, when you think back to that experience, that bad thing is like all you can recall about it. And that's not what we would want in terms of hospitality for our guests. So we are here to help you with that today. If you're going to be planning an event, I would encourage you to tag a friend who you think this episode might help. Give us a retweet if you feel like your followers on Twitter would benefit from this episode, and join us here. Want to give a special thank you to the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic for their support of That Expert Show. Stick around and I will tell you how they have made a huge difference for our family, and they've helped us get back to life and take away knee pain. Our guest today comes from the corporate world as well as the nonprofit world. She's the former marketing director for Cisco Foods, was also an special events coordinator for the March of Dimes organization. She has done everything. She's run trade shows, she has run grand openings, and she's of course also done weddings. She has her own company now. It's called Creative Celebrations, and she just plans a myriad of different kinds of events now, but mostly weddings. And what I've learned is that the type of planning that she does for a wedding really can expand to all different kinds of events. We are so pleased to have joining us live Carolyn O'Brien. Carolyn, thanks for being with us.
Great to be here.
All right, let's get started on this, because I think that you mentioned to me in our pre-interview three basic concepts, three basic focal points as you sit down to plan an event, whether it's a wedding or something else. Do you want to talk about those and why we should be focused on those three elements?
Sure, Anna. Every concept, every event that you're going to have has three main points. It's what's your guest count, what's your vision for the day, and what's your budget. And those three can be all over the board. And a job as an event planner is to kind of even those out and make sure that if your budget is limited, but your guest count is 300, and your vision is something that's out of this world, you need to adjust one of those. Either your vision needs to come down, your guest count needs to come down, or your budget needs to come up. So it just needs to even out to make a successful event.
So when you are talking about and considering the different types of venues, what are the things that you need to keep in mind?
Well, the first thing I look at, it's going back to those 3 points, is what is your vision for the day? So if you want something laid back and casual, we're not going to get you the Portland Art Museum, or we're not going to find a ballroom in one of the hotels. We're going to do something outside, or we're going to find something that's really about your vision. And then again, it goes to guest count, because, you can only have so many people in each venue. So then we're going to go to what your budget is. Now, some venues will require that they have their own catering and whatnot, but the most interesting part that I find people don't realize is that a venue can look like it costs a lot, but once you consider all the rentals that would be included in that rental of the venue, all of the other components that you have to get. I've done a lot of weddings that are out in the meadow, and you have to bring in every chair, every spoon, every salt and pepper shaker, the portable toilets, you name it. And so once you are done getting all of those rentals, you're really not sure you're saving a lot of money by doing something casual. out in the outdoors.
And when you talk about going to an outdoor event, one of the obvious things that you really need to think about is the time of year. And, you know, you don't have to nix an outdoor event just because, you know, you might be holding it in somewhere that is rainy, like the Pacific Northwest, given the time of year. But you do need to at least anticipate and plan for that, right?
Correct. I always put a plan B into my overall plan for every event. It doesn't matter whether it's August or that it could get too hot or rain, or that it's December and we can have one of our ice storms. So there's always a plan B. A perfect example is I do a lot of weddings on the Oregon coast where you never know what it's going to get. You know it's going to be windy, but you don't know if it's going to be rainy or perfect. So sometimes I'll have a client that really just wants to be on the beach no matter what. And then I go to my standard, what is going to be our guest experience? It's great if you're loving the beach so much that you don't care if your hair's crazy and wet in all of your pictures. But what's Grandma Jean going to think when she's sitting out there in the rain? So even those types of things, a plan B may not fit that bride to go indoors, but we'll get white golf umbrellas and we'll rent 70 of them as a backup. And that's something I have in place for a June 1st wedding of this year, because you never know on June 1st. Could be 80, could be 60 and raining and gale force winds. So we hope for the first one.
Right. Now, when you go, you know, to sign a contract with the venue, what are things that you should be looking for in that contract to be included in the contract, and what are things that are red flags that you need to avoid?
Yeah, great question. I always review the contract prior to my client's signing, because we want to know what's all included. Like I said before, when you're looking at a venue, it's not just walls and a door. It's how many chairs and tables, and do they have a preferred caterer list? So some people are thinking, I want to have my own caterer, I want to do it my way, I want to bring in Aunt Jean this time to do the catering. And I don't recommend that. We have a word for it in the industry that is a friendor instead of a vendor. And when I find that, I encourage my clients to go a different direction and say, okay, that's great if she's the best cook of anything, but let's have her do the rehearsal dinner. Let's do it in a different way that's going to make sure that she's enjoying that day too, and that we've got professionals in there that have worked this particular venue, know what they're doing, have fed that many people, always have a backup. You need to rely on professionals on that big day.
It can be so tempting, though, because if you do have a friend who is, relatively good at photography or some other type of skill, it's so tempting to hire that friend, not only because you're saving money, but because, maybe you're helping expose their business to your guests at the wedding, something along those lines. There's a win-win there, potentially.
Right. And in that case, I'm not saying we can't work with that friender, but what I make sure I do is get the telephone number, the email, and I have a real specific conversation with that friend. And I'm talking to them, let's say it's a DJ, and I'm like, okay, so are you ready to mic the officiant so that they can be heard? Do you have a handheld mic that can be used for everyone to give speeches? Will you help put people together when we're telling them that they need to go to the buffet? Being the MC, there's so much more involved than just spinning records for being a DJ, that I kind of lay it out for them months ahead of time. This is what I'm expecting from the DJ, and they usually get it. They just say, okay, if this is what's needed, I'll I'll stick to this plan. And if not, if they realize that this is just kind of over their head at that point, then it's great, because it's months ahead of time that they're deciding, this may not be something I want to take on, and we get a different DJ, for example.
And what about when it comes to picking the food choices, the food vendors? What are things that you've seen in terms of situations that have gone awry and versus situations where everybody walks away from the event going, oh man, the food was so good, and that's really something that's memorable about the event?
Well, luckily, I can say that I've never had a fiasco, and probably the reason why is I've heard all the fiascos and just kind of steer my clients a different direction. A lot of people, especially here in the Portland area, are all about the food carts, which are so, up and coming and cool. And what I say to, which I've had several couples say, we think food carts would be great. They would just drive up and we do this, and And I tell them the food is great, but food cart vendors are not necessarily caterers, and they're not going to be bussing tables and cleaning things up and setting tables and doing all the other parts. So if it was just, and again, that goes to guest count, if there was 15 of us at a family event and you wanted to bring in a food cart, that's great. But if there's 200 people and we're all trying to get them fed and everything done well, a food cart just isn't the way to go. But I don't like to squash my clients' dreams. So again, I just suggest maybe we'll have Voodoo Donuts come as a late night snack, and they bring up their great pink mobile, and that's a way to incorporate the vision, but still keep the guest experience at an all-time high.
Right. And I guess, if you were to bring a food cart, it could be sort of an add-on to the main catering of the event, depending, again, on your budget. Let's talk about that budget issue, for example, because whether it's a wedding or, like we said, some other kind of milestone celebration or like a class reunion, when you sit down to look at your budget, is there a portion allotment? You know how, like, when you're planning your household budget, you should only be spending so much on where you live versus entertainment versus other things? Like, is there a proportion that needs to be checked as you're planning?
Exactly. The first thing I ask my clients after their vision, budget, and guest count is, based on that vision, what's the most important thing for you that day? And a lot of people, it's just, I want a dance party and I want the music to be amazing, and this is where I want my focus to be. So the DJ or the band goes to the top of the pile, so to speak, for your budget. Some people, it's all about flowers, and we just kind of negotiate, because you only have so much budget, but you have a lot of things you want to incorporate. What I also tell my clients about budget is that photography kind of throws people a lot of how expensive it is. And I always tell them, that's true, but you're going to have those pictures for the rest of your life. Your flowers are going to die, your cake's going to be eaten, everything else is going to go away, but your photography is so important. So if it's several $1,000s, that's worth the investment to keep the memories alive for your big day.
I think it's pretty popular for people nowadays, because we live in such a video-heavy world, to hire a videographer as well. I know that this is going to be the same area where you say don't just hire a friender, but are there things that you should be watching for as you go to hire a videographer? And should the videographer theoretically be the same entity as the photographer? Is that normal?
It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's a good idea because they work well together, because you don't want a photo with the videographer in it, and you don't want the videographer taking pictures of the photographers taking the pictures. So there's so much that can be done with videography now. The drones are just amazing, of having overview shots of vineyards that are here and different large areas. It's really easy to say, we're just going to have a friend do it, and then at the end look at your finished piece and not be too excited. With videographers and photographers, I always suggest to my clients to look at their portfolios online and just get a feel for who has a style that you like and who's going to capture the day the way you want it to.
What are the main things, like you've done this for a number of years now, and you've seen all kinds of scenarios, either probably events that you've been to. What are the common pitfalls? What are the common mistakes that people make? Like the thing that they most often don't think about as they're throwing an event?
There's an interesting thing that we have in the industry that's flow. And people just don't think about that. So there's two elements to flow. It's how your guests are going from one thing to another, how much space there is, how much wiggle room, how much talking room, how the day goes. The other part of that is the timing of everything. I've done so many events that it basically is in my head how much time it's going to take for 3 people to give a toast and how much time it's going to take to cut a cake or any of those events. What I create for my clients is a timeline that is literally minute to minute of the day, from the minute you wake up and start getting hair and makeup on or start prepping for your corporate event to what car are the gifts going to go into at the end of the night, and do you want your guests to be able to take the floral arrangements? But if they do, have you rented the containers they're in, and so where do those need to go? So it's those kind of detailed things that I think is what the investment in an event planner is best for. It's
Absolutely.
Just nothing's going to throw you because we have it in the timeline, and if it's not in the timeline, it's not going to happen, but it's going to all flow because we've figured this out and we know how much time it should take, and we're not going to forget anything, and so neither are you. I tell my clients, just get up, look good, show up, and let me do the rest.
That sounds like a perfect event. As we sit here and talk about guests and the consideration of guests and their mobility at an event, it does bring to mind for me Reflex Knee Clinic, which is an entity, a business that has helped our family tremendously. A number of years ago, my husband John was suffering from a lot of knee pain. He'd been through like 3 knee surgeries, and it wasn't getting any better. It was actually getting worse. He busted 2 patellar tendons and needed microfracture surgery. It was really kind of a rough patch of a few years. It stemmed from genetics, and it also stemmed from his background as a collegiate athlete. But I really am so grateful that we found the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic, because they are the experts in knee pain. They have these cutting-edge technologies that are non-surgical, which is so cool. They gave him stem cell treatment as well as PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma treatment, and it's been incredible to watch him regain his mobility and not have to think about knee pain as we're going to an event. I mean, literally, like, we would go to events and we'd have to think about and make allowances for whether it was going to be hard on his knees, to walk up a hill, or if we were going to be standing for long periods of time. So if you are in pain, or if you know somebody who is in pain, I really encourage you to call the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic. Go to their website, reflexknees.com, and you can see John's case study. You can see how they helped him, and hopefully they can help you get back to life as well. Just had to mention that real quick. Carolyn, as we continue with you, what sort of allowances do you think people need to make? Like you talked about, it was either Grandma Jean or Aunt Jean earlier, but when you have older guests or guests that have mobility issues, that is also something that you really need to think about if you're planning a successful event.
Exactly. Every time I start putting that timeline together, I ask, are there anyone that will need special help getting to whatever site we are? Again, I do a lot of ceremonies that are on the beach, and so I have a list of people that are going to be put in a truck and brought down to the ceremony that way and then brought back, which is the only way a lot of grandparents are going to be able to really get to the event and enjoy the event. Again, we're back to guest experience, and be able to do it that way. And then there's some things that are as simple as, you look back to the venues. You've got to make sure that they're ADA accessible and what the specifications are. But that's always part of the initial timeline questionnaire of, are there needs that we should take care of? And it's easy as can be when you've thought about it months ahead of time, and a complete catastrophe if you haven't thought about it and it's the day of. So,
or even in the days leading up to it, because there are a lot of things that need to be planned for months in advance. As we talked about the consideration of guests, I know just from my own experience that when I go to plan an event or throw an event, sometimes the natural tendency is to lean pretty hard on your family and friends to chip in and help out. To some extent, that's probably okay, but I think that, you and I have discussed that that's not ideal, especially if it's an event like a wedding or something, an experience that the family or friend wants to feel like they're actually a part of and enjoying as well.
Exactly. If you are having a grad party or a wedding or any kind of family event, and you are expecting your family to go in and set tables and bring in ice and all those kinds of things, you really are just asking your closest family and friends to be your caterers for the day. You're just not really looking at them as a guest, and they're, especially if it's surprises at the end, and this isn't their logistics, this isn't their bailiwick, they don't know what they're doing, it's just going to be frustrating for everyone. So again, I encourage just to invest a little bit and get professionals and let your family enjoy the day as much as you do.
What other advice do you have for maybe, let's say, younger couples or people who have a very limited budget and they're trying to plan a class reunion or some kind of gathering, and they really just don't have a lot of money to work with, and they don't have the money to hire an event coordinator? What would you say to them?
Well, and people ask me all the time, how much does an event cost? And I always say it's exactly as much as you want to spend on it. So an event can cost $5,000 or $500,000, but it's only what your budget is that's going to dictate how you're going to spend that. So I tell people, let's look at your budget. And then and your vision. What do you want to accomplish for that day? And maybe we're going to bring down your guest count, because it's just going to automatically save you a lot of money by just having that much fewer people. Another thing is, I don't think that younger couples consider is the size of their wedding party. And that if you have 12 groomsmen and 12 bridesmaids, and yes, I've had weddings that are like that, you're going to be $75 times 12 on bridesmaids' bouquets. You're going to be 12 times $16 on every boutonniere. Those kinds of things add up. So if you have a simple budget, just keep everything simple, and it will work in your favor.
As far as decorations go, when we're talking about the different prioritization of an event, and I am thinking about weddings in particular, do people even remember decorations? I mean, I feel like there's only a handful of weddings that I have personally attended where I walk away going, wow, the decorations of that wedding were incredible. And the rest of them, I couldn't tell you what color or type of flowers they had. I can't remember what their theme was. And it's just not really something that goes into my memory.
Yeah. I have two little secrets on how to have a big effect with a little budget on decor. And one of them is lighting. You can have uplighting that goes around a room for $120, and you have the glow of the color of whatever your theme is, and it just looks like you've decorated the entire room. Another thing is linens. Your table linens, if they go to the floor, it's much more of an elegant effect than it is if they go halfway or 2/3. It's just a very simple thing, but it's an easy way to spend, again, maybe $200 and have your whole look a lot better.
Interesting. Okay. What other advice would you offer to people that I wasn't wise enough to ask you?
Well, I would say to just plan ahead. I mean, the whole concept of being an event planner is the planning portion of that. Take a look at all of the scenarios that can be. Make that timeline. I know it may seem like it's just overkill, but in the end, if everyone has followed through the timeline and we know when to start hair and makeup so that it can be done by the time that the photography starts, then your whole day is running well. But nobody really thinks about something as simple as, that we need to get hair and makeup done starting at 8:30, and I put things in like who's going to be providing water for everyone all day to keep hydrated, and who's going to be bringing in lunch. Those kinds of things. When all of a sudden you're having this big, fantastic day, but something as simple as not remembering to feed everyone gets really in the way and jeopardizes the event.
Is there something specific to a corporate event, like a trade show or like a corporate business meeting, that you would advise? Obviously, that's a whole different ball game from a wedding or some kind of anniversary party.
Right. Well, a lot of it goes back to the same concept of having that timeline. Communication is key. When I did food shows for Cisco, it's, you're talking 3,000 people through a day, or the grand opening of the Woodburn Outlet Center, that was 4,000 people a day. So when I do a wedding, I'm like, oh, this is easy, because it's all about the communication. It's about getting all your people lined up. If everyone knows their part, then they can step up and get it done on that day. So it's really about communicating well to, whether it's Aunt Jean helping you out, whether it's the people that are bringing your staging and your rentals and your tents for events, and making sure that all that timing is done appropriately, that your tents are going to be put up prior to your tables being delivered, so that it's just a snowball effect. But it's just really about timing and communication.
Well, and on that one, the tidbit that I can offer, having worked in TV news for almost 2 decades, is if you're trying to get publicity for a public event like that, send out those press releases, be persistent about calling the news stations to try and get any kind of local coverage. And little secret, provide parking. Like, tell the news stations in advance that you will provide parking and set aside parking for their news crew that may or may not show up, because news crews are on the fly, like they're on the go, and this may be like event number 4 or 5 that they're having to cover in that day. So the last thing that they want to do is show up and park a million miles away from the event that they're actually trying to get to. So that's something that, I don't know, I've just noticed that makes a huge difference. It did for me when we would go and try to cover events as well. Carolyn, thank you so much for your time and for your insight into event planning. I know this is going to be helpful to a lot of people out there, regardless of what they are planning for, and hope that you have years and years of fantastic celebrations ahead of you as well.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. And thank you for joining this episode of That Expert Show. I appreciate you. I know that you can always connect with us via social media. We are on Facebook and Instagram, at Twitter. You can find me on Facebook at Anna Canzano, on Twitter and Instagram at That Expert Show. It's not always easy to catch something live, I know, so we always put this content back out to you as a YouTube show as well. And you can find us on YouTube at That Expert Show, and search for us as as well on wherever you listen to podcasts, because if you just want to listen to this content and take it in that way, you can always catch episodes of That Expert Show on Apple iTunes or Google Play or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. You can watch previous episodes as well at thatexpertshow.com. Drop me a line if you've got an idea for the show that you think that we should be doing, and hope you can join us for the next episode of That Expert Show, where you help run the show.